Hello, welcome to the I've Never Met a Woman Architect Before podcast with your host, me, Michelle Grace Hoddle Architect. I'm here with my guest today, Cecilia Ramos, AIA of Lutron Ketra.
Lutron is a leading manufacturer of architectural lighting and motorized shades and intuitive controls. For more than 60 years, the same core belief that's guided Lutron, that innovative design and the transformative nature of light, have the power to enrich people's lives.
Thank you, Cecilia. Cecilia's expertise is in lighting, interiors, and architectural design. And at Lutron, Cecilia is responsible for leading the company's work in A&D. She holds degrees from MIT and Princeton University, her MR, and has traveled the world as a lighting designer for luxury brands, including Louis Vuitton and Christian Dior. She lives in New York City when not on planes. Before joining Lutron, she specialized in the lighting of luxury retail stores for LVMH brands. Louis Vuitton, Dior, is Hublot, right? Hublot? Hublot? Yeah, okay. Fendi, with award-winning lighting design firm L'Observatoire International. And prior, as principal of her own design consulting practice, she worked in exhibition and installation design for renowned clients such as the Guggenheim Museum, Princeton University Art Museum, and Macro C. In her current role, Cecilia is responsible for leading Lutron's architecture and design strategy. Her work encompasses business development, creative direction, marketing, experiential design, and strategy. She also led the interior and lighting design of the award-winning Ketra headquarters in Austin, Texas, Los Angeles Design Studio, and 2022 Prismatic events throughout Europe. She is an accomplished and sought-after speaker and has presented at conferences worldwide, including IES Barcelona, ISE Mexico, ASID National Conference, CEDIA in Denver, Design Leadership Network Business Forum, Design Management Institute, Madrid Forum, Design Management Institute Madrid, Dubai Design Week, LED Forum Brazil, and Energy Puerto Rico. She is co-author of the book Architectural Lighting, Designing with Light and Space by Princeton Architectural Press. Welcome, Cecilia.
Thank you, Michelle. Happy to be here.
So I was introduced to Cecilia by David Weinstein, who I met a few years ago through Lutron, and I found out that Cecilia she is actually an architect working with Lutron Ketra. So I just thought that it was great. We spent a few days in Scottsdale. It was a beautiful trip. That was an absolutely amazing trip that we had in Scottsdale with you guys. And the hotel was wonderful. We got to have lunch at the Biltmore. The Biltmore is a beautiful place. And also going to Taliesin West and Cosanti. So it's like, it was just a great trip all around.
I have amazing memories of it as well.
Yes. And I mean, I really like when we were eating dinner up on the rooftop terrace, and then it started to rain, and then this beautiful rainbow just came out over Camelback Mountain. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better example of lighting for just like setting the mood for the whole trip.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was a trip that was all about nature and light and place and architecture, of course.
Mm-hmm. So, Cecilia, what are your first recollections of experiencing architecture?
So, I grew up in a household of Spanish parents in Boston, Massachusetts, but they had immigrated here in their 20s. And we were fortunate enough to always go back to Spain for the Christmas holiday to visit family. And my mother's from this beautiful town in the south of Spain called Córdoba in Andalusia. And architecturally, it has one of the most impressive architectural wonders, the Mezquita, the Mosque of Córdoba. And so, it's a beautiful space that's layer upon layer of time and culture and religion, because it was built first in the, I think it was 750s under the Islamic, state that was in Spain. But then over the
Yeah.
years, as the Spanish, conquisition came in, they
Mhm.
reappropriated it as a cathedral, even to the point where in the 1600s inserted like a full-on cathedral in the nave. And as a child going there for mass, for Christmas mass, the kind of wonder of being in this layered space that is, stunning, because it's this kind of repetitive space of these arches that are striped in red and white. And it's a place that has evolved over the years, that, in some ways is continues to evolve. That's so storied, made an impression on me for sure. And I was fortunate enough about 2 months ago to go back for a cousin's wedding there. And every time I go there, I'm just amazed at the beauty and the scale of the space, both the interior and also the exterior, which now it's a courtyard. It's the Patio de los Naranjos, a beautiful courtyard in the center of the mosque that is maintained as a public space.
Oh.
Which I think is actually kind of special with a building of this kind of historic relevance, because in most cases in Europe, you have to pay to enter everything, right?
Mm.
But the fact that they've maintained that courtyard, surrounded by the mosque as a place of gathering for the city, for tourists, where you don't have to pay to enter, I think was pretty fascinating. And that's something that struck me on this last trip.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my daughter studied in Alicante for a semester, so I
Okay.
flew over, and it was right before Christmas. So, all the walking streets and everything were kind of decorated for Christmas, um and then we flew up to Copenhagen and spent Christmas up there, which is where I studied abroad in Copenhagen. So it was nice, and it was just the two of us, right? We didn't have any other family with that. I mean, besides kind of my Danish family, I mean, they still consider you to be, the kids of, you're like still like the kids of your Danish parents that were there, and yeah. So it's
Absolutely. I mean, I
always
think
nice.
parents, that history and culture of your family plays such an important part in who you become and what you're exposed to as a young child. And I was very fortunate to have that exposure to Spain, the culture there, and of course the architecture. Whenever I hear from people who are going to Spain, they ask for advice. For me, the heart of Spain is really in the south, Andalusia. And in the heavy hitting cities that people go to are Sevilla, Granada, and Malaga. But Cordoba, I would say, is probably one of the most underrated European cities. And the mosque is stunning, stunning. And when you talk about kind of wandering the streets, it also made me think about, the old town where, in Cordoba, there's even a street that's called La Calle del Pañuelo, which means the street of the handkerchief, because it's so skinny, you can barely pull a handkerchief through it, right? And so again, that concept of experiencing kind of like the tightness, the compression, expansion of space within the walls and context of a historic city, and then arriving at the grandeur of this, cathedral mosque. It is, those moments of understanding that kind of variety and almost narrative of, how you construct an urban experience. They stuck with me and absolutely have influenced the work I've done since then.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, more of the medieval cities.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Um, so what are three classic buildings that you like and why?
So, I was kind of chewing on this one last night, and the first one comes so quickly and so easily to me because I think it really became a pivotal point in my career and led me into the world of lighting, which is the MIT Chapel by Iris Saarinen would be number one. So I did my undergraduate studies at MIT, and I remember very well one of my professors in the studio course on day one of that studio. He marched us all over to the MIT chapel and sat us down, and for 3 hours in silence, just had us observe what was happening. And, you can imagine like a 20-year-old, thinking of a million other things that they could be doing with their 3 hours of time. And the first hour is probably like nail bitingly get me out of here. But then you settle into it. And the beauty of the space is that it's a cylindrical building with this water moat around the periphery. And the light bounces off the water moat and then enters the walls of the interior of the chapel through this kind of circumference of glass. And the walls in the interior are brick, but in an undulated formation. And so all of a sudden you have this interplay of the reflections of light and water on this undulating brick that, of course, is in concert with the sun of the outdoors, right? Like what's happening, lights passing, clouds overhead, it's changing. Maybe the wind comes into play and the ripples get faster. And then also in the center, over the kind of altar of the space, there's this large skylight with this beautiful metal hanging sculpture that, captures and twinkles under that light. And for me, that building was just such a profound experience because one, I think it taught me the power of patience and observation as it relates to architecture. Two, because it made me realize that, some of the best architecture is the architecture that's dynamic, right? It retrains us to look at space in different ways. If you think about, Renzo Piano and the Demenil collection in Texas, the whole concept that you'd see artworks under different light as the light changed throughout the course of the day. That was novel, right? But it was something that was really profound and has influenced a lot of curatorial and museum spaces since then. So again, this concept of like dynamic architecture as it gets transformed through natural light or artificial light. And I think the third thing is that there's a simplicity to it, like the simplicity to the form that was very profound and beautiful. The scale was right. It was non-denominational. Everyone's welcome. Everyone can feel it in their own way. In some cases it's used for mass or other religious things. In other cases, we had our sorority initiation in there, right? So like a multi-purpose space that accepts and welcomes all. So for me, that's absolutely like architecture number one that, had a profound experience that's influenced me since then. I can launch into my other two because, I'm super passionate.
Go right ahead. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. No, absolutely. Did you want me to say something? No, I don't have to.
You let me know. Jump in and have you been to the MIT chapel?
It's very interesting because we were kind of talking about religious spaces before this, or just religion,
Right.
and then we were kind of talking about, yeah. And I think there's always, Tom Koenig and I kind of talk about how there's spirituality in spaces, and it really doesn't, it's also about the architecture and and how that brings emotions, the architecture is bringing emotions to you, so it's like, it could be a religious space, but it could be any type of space with these kind of like spiritual qualities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's in some ways, like, I think my second space is similar to that one in the fact that it becomes a blank canvas for, the inhabitant to really kind of associate their needs, their views on it. And my second space, I'll mention because it was influential in many ways, was a visit out to Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. Again, this is probably my early 20s. And it is this. Have you been before, Michelle?
Okay, I have not, but
Okay.
just go ahead and explain it, and then I'll tell you like what, and I'll tell you like my thing with it. But I am totally. Basically, it's like I haven't been able to go the last two times because of the weather. Because after you get in there, and we've had this friend who has an Airstream, and you can't get them back in there, because you'll get stuck. So, so both times that we've tried to go, it's like it's been too wet, so we haven't been able to go back in there.
And it's like out in the middle of nowhere, right? You can either access it, through Arizona, drive to the northeast corner of Arizona, and then cut in. It's a national historic landmark. And you go there and you're lucky if you see 5 other people. And it is this beautiful, site in kind of Red Rock, New Mexico. with the ruins of a Pueblo nation from the 800s. And again, I talk about it in parallel to the MIT chapel, because in some ways, what were these great houses or these ceremonial kivas have been stripped down to just their load-bearing walls and a very geometric floor plan, which amazes you because the scale and the vastness of this, it was, a meeting point of all these different tribes, it's impressive. I mean, this thing is huge.
Yeah.
Two, its orientation to the land and to the sun is absolutely stunning. And so it was all about these alignments of the apertures and the windows and the doors with the solar and lunar phenomena. And so it really is tied to the earth in that way. And you can't help but feel small when you're there. And I think that's a really beautiful, powerful sensation to have in this world where, oftentimes in the jobs that we do, we're trying to be big, right? But it's humbling to be out there in the earth in this kind of peripheral, like almost primitive spaces, but also like boundaries of space that have been carved out, and realize that, you're just this kind of speck within this vast landscape, vast architecture, and vastness of world and light. And so that place had a profound impact on me, and also sent me down the rabbit hole of becoming in love and obsessed with great architecture of the Southwest, like the Rick Joyce of the world and whatnot, because
Yeah.
all the things and making it into their work in really beautiful ways.
Mm-hmm. I took a Native American studies class at Cal Poly, and so we had to choose something, and I chose Chaco Canyon, right? Okay. So of course yeah. So I built a whole model of it out of plasticine, and so it's even though I know all these things about it, I haven't been able to get there. So, but I did. I mean, because you have so many other places, like Bandelier National Monument. So you can kind of see like the progression, or the regression of the different Native American tribes and the different civilizations, right? So you have Bandelier National Monument that's near there. And then we went to Mesa Verde.
Beautiful as well.
Yes, because when we couldn't get it again, we couldn't get into Chaco Canyon, so then we went to Mesa Verde, and then there's Montezuma's Castle, and then Montezuma's Well, that's like also in Arizona, kind of like all in that area. So I mean, it's it's amazing. It's so architectural, but also very like you said, very spiritual.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Very spiritual. Yeah.
There are places you go to and you just feel the power of that place, and it sticks with you. And I think when I visit contemporary buildings now, I'm drawn to the ones that, have that effect. But I wouldn't say they're few and far between. I think there's all amazing, great architecture out there, but there's, to have a space of that scale, of that kind of connection to the landscape, it's rare. You don't get too many of those. They're really fantastic.
Yeah.
And then my third one, the third one, I was tied between two, but I think there's a way to interweave both. And the two spaces are the Ciudad Abierta in Valparaíso, Chile, which I'll come back to and explain what that is. And then in some ways, it has a lot of parallels to Taliesin West by Frank Lloyd Wright. So the Ciudad Abierta in Valparaíso is this open city in the sand dunes of Ritoque, just north of Valparaíso, that has been constructed over many, many years, since the 1970s, by the students and the professors of the Catholic University there. And what's really beautiful, I mean, I had the opportunity to spend a summer there when I was in graduate school at Princeton, researching and understanding the work that they did. But what was really powerful and beautiful was that for them, architecture is tied to written word, where poetry is such an influential part of Chilean culture. You think about, Pablo Neruda and all these great poets that come from them, that for them to build something, it has to be grounded in, experience through written word. And it also has to be kind of grounded in, obviously, the landscape. And the parallels between the landscape and the written word is that, with dunes by the ocean, that's a very fleeting thing. And so the way that these, spaces are built, and they're built as communal gathering spaces. Some of them are homes, some of them are, places to work and study. It always starts with a poem, and then it's constructed by the community. And they get lived in and re-inhabited by new people over the years. And as new people go in, they get transformed, and they're absolutely stunning. And the reason I draw that parallel to Taliesin West is because, in many ways, Taliesin West is also an experiment of pedagogy and education, right?
Mhm.
And with Frank Lloyd Wright having that as his winter camp. I'm going to be specific about that. It wasn't his winter home; it was his winter camp, and teaching the new generation of students who wanted to come learn from him. It was also a space like Taliesin West is also a space that's open to the elements, right? That didn't have enclosures and glass and windows. It was all through shading systems originally. And the students there too, over their 3-year period of time, first learned, the architecture from Frank Lloyd Wright and the faculty there. But then in year 2, were encouraged to build their own little folies out in the desert. And in year 3, inhabit them. All right. And so I think that idea of, learning through building and being one with the landscape. And we heard fabulous stories, Michelle, when we were there, from the people who had built and studied there about rattlesnakes and tents and all these crazy things and how you design around that.
Yeah.
But, it gives, I think there's a permanence to architecture sometimes. In the case of Chaco Canyon, that's absolutely the case. But I think equally important is this kind of ephemerality and how you embrace that. And I think both the open city in Chile as well as Taliesin, West kind of bake that all in. And then, of course, Taliesin West, I think, is a beautiful example of how buildings can evolve over time because, within the past 2 years, Lutron Ketra had the opportunity to re-illuminate the space and do a retrofit of the fixtures there into LEDs and Ketra LEDs because it had to be still, true to that incandescent feel. And so see a building have like new life breathed into it through the power of illumination and have that be historically accurate and, have the whole Taliesin West Historic Preservation Board be on board with it was a really fascinating thing to observe and see our company see through. And again, it just tells us how buildings continue to evolve over time, and it's a great thing.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, there's something, right? There's some things where, I mean, what project was ever designed with fluorescent light, like as its true thing? I mean, nobody's ever liked fluorescent. I mean, I've never liked fluorescent lights, I mean, that was like, and then, I mean, we used to have to learn in that, like in school. I mean, we were probably going crazy. I mean, it's because it isn't, I mean, it isn't good for you. But but and then just the whole flickering, right? The flickering, and then they wouldn't, they would be like, oh yeah, we'll just get somebody in there to do that. So you would just be sitting there in like this flickering light for like in my high school, we had a new high school that's the kind of, it was built in the 60s, and like they had fluorescent light, and that was kind of like what. Yeah, so it's kind of nice to see, it's like, it's not like you guys reinvented, like it was never, they had fluorescence there, but it wasn't like that the place was designed with fluorescence in mind. You took it back to probably the way that it actually was, right? Like in the right when they had candlelight. I mean, I'm sure they used candlelight.
Yeah, and some of the lighting details. I mean, I think Frank Lloyd Wright is a fabulous architect. I'm married to a Midwestern Illinoisan from downstate Illinois, where there's nothing to do out there when we go visit, but say, hey, let's go visit another Frank Lloyd Wright property 2 hours away, right? That's like our entertainment. But I think one of the beautiful things about Frank Lloyd Wright's work is that he's always considering that integration of natural light through the apertures of the windows, but also the electric light, where everything is like amazingly detailed. We were retrofitting Taliesin, and you'd like slide this diffuse little panel in the ceiling. It would reveal this little triangular, cavity where you had this A lamp, and we just relamp it with a Ketra A lamp and slide it back together. And then the ceiling has a glowing fixture embedded into it, right? So someone like Frank Lloyd Wright really had the mastery of not just architecture, but of lighting design, which have now become very separate professions. But I think that's more of a recent thing within the last, let's say, 30 to 50 years.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but you
Yeah.
have to his work and his mastery of all of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Did you ever go to Iowa? Did you ever go to Iowa?
I've been to Iowa. I've been to all 50 states. That was my COVID 2020 vacation special. But I have not visited his buildings out there.
There's uh so my late ex-husband, his grandparents owned the Schneider House, which was
Okay.
designed by Walter Burley Griffin and Marion
Yep.
Mahoney.
Yep.
Yeah, and so there's the Glen there, and then across the street they moved the Frank Lloyd Wright House to across the street, which I forget which one that is, which I'm even like doing some volunteer work for Taliesin right now, and that's one of the houses on my list is that house, which I'm spacing on what the but it's the Frank Lloyd Wright House that's in there in Mason City. And then of course they've got um the inn at the park there, which is the hotel that
Mhm.
that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright that's there in
My
Mason City.
50th
But
state, believe it or not, was Wisconsin. That was the last one I got to. And the Wisconsin trip was driven by two things. One, visiting a nephew who was at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and two, by visiting Taliesin East, because that was a must-do.
yeah, I didn't get there. I was only in I was well, I took a road trip. One of my friends, well, he went to go work for Kohler.
Okay.
Yeah, so we drove from LA to Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Yeah, and saw Kohler,
Ways to go visit
Wisconsin.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, Kohler, Wisconsin. I've heard great things about it.
yeah, yeah. And so Sheboygan was where, was right where they first started before they built Kohler. They like started their old house is in Sheboygan, so the
Gotcha.
old house, which is now an art museum. Now it's the Kohler Art Museum. So yeah,
Right, right.
there you go.
That's on
Yeah,
my
so that
list.
was my only experience with Wisconsin. It's just right. There's always a reason to go somewhere. Yeah, yeah,
Always.
yeah. Okay, so what do you like about being an architect?
I think that's a good segue because as an architect, there's this constant curiosity of seeing new things and being inspired. And I think travel is such a big part of that, right? And it can be travel in the sense of, flying to Milan for Salone or, going to Spain to see these, historic cathedrals, whatever it might be. But it could just be travel in your backyard, like what we're talking about here. You're in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, and you're looking for something to do, and you start kind of mapping out the architectural little gems in the area, and that gives you a reason to go and see new things. And so I think, architecture, I think, is such an amazing profession, but also subject to study because it encourages you to be curious, but also to be multidisciplinary. When I think about, architectural education, you have to be good at not just designing, but you have to be good at presenting, at defending your, thesis or speaking to
Mhm.
a studio crit crowd. And then, as you go into your professional work, whether it's residential or commercial, like let's say it's residential, all of a sudden, like knowledge of art history and contemporary arts and the, auction scene and the galleries is also absolutely fundamental for what you do because you're designing spaces for amazing art collections. So, I mean, all that to say that it's such a multidisciplinary profession, in the 16th century Renaissance man type of way or Renaissance woman. That it keeps you always on your tiptoes. I
Uh-huh.
always say I'm a perpetual learner, and I think through the lens of architecture and design, um, it keeps my brain happy and always kind of churning out new ideas. And
Mhm.
I've kind of fallen into the specialty of lighting, whether it's for Lutron, where it's the totality of lighting of
Mhm.
natural light, artificial light, all combined through our systems of shading and controls and actual lighting fixtures. Um, or lighting the sense of lighting design, or I also do a lot of fine arts and painting, and for me, like lighting is just absolutely critical to painting.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oil
Yeah.
painting, like the basis of an oil painting is an underpainting out of burnt sienna, where you're highlighting away the light spots through turpentine, right, and then glazing on top. Um, these are things that you learn during architecture school because you're asked to take courses in art history and fine arts and studio arts, but then it also becomes a lens through which you see the world. And even in just the photographs that you take and post to Instagram, like they're composed and framed because of how you've been trained as an architect. They're illuminated because of all these things that you've learned throughout the years, and it's something that just becomes your life in a beautiful way, right? It's not like you go to work and you leave it at work. You bring it home, you live it, you breathe it, and it's inspiring. And I think we're fortunate to be in a field like that where it never gets old, and it always leads you to look for the next thing and create the next thing.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. We went to the Grand Canyon, and I had not been there since I was 16, I mean, on our way from, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So on our way from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to San Diego, we kind of like did the road trip, and we stopped, at Four Corners and the Grand Canyon and the Rocky Mountains. And I had not remembered, until, and I'm not quite sure how much of the Grand Canyon we even saw at that time, because I mean, it was a million years ago for me. But I did remember, going back, like we had lunch in the El Tovar Hotel. But then I was looking at these other structures that they have around there, and I was like, oh, gosh, I actually like the other little structures better than the El Tovar Hotel. And it turns out that they were designed by Mary Coulter, who was a drafter, and she did all the, so she kind of did the Hopi House. I mean, she did the Desert Tower, she did the house for the painter who painted all of those amazing paintings,
Yeah.
yeah. So she had that window where he could just like literally paint out of the window. I'm sure they took down all of the panes, like so that he would. There were probably no panes in that bay window when he was
Right.
doing things, but
A picture frame for which you do your painting, right? They teach you in art school, a little aperture
yes,
your composition.
yes, exactly. So I just thought that was so interesting because I felt so connected to those buildings as opposed to the El Tavaro, which I mean, that's fine. It's El Tavaro, it's big, but I mean, it's very dark inside. Where the other structures that she did brought in much more of the light, and the light at the Grand Canyon is like kind of so strange, and right, because there is that, right, you're falling off into the edge of the world. It's that it is like so bright, like right there at the edge. I mean, it's incredibly bright, and you don't realize until you actually are taking photographs, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it's so bright, and because there is all of that. And I mean, you probably know like all the dynamics of it, but whatever that is, it kind of like all brings it together, and it is like an unusual, it's one of those unusual like things, it's as if right when you have the eclipse, when you have these other things where like light, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with light is that it's not just the light that's emitted by the source, excuse me. It's what also bounces off the surface as it's illuminating.
Yes.
And so, an interesting example that I can speak to is, in our experience center in New York, we have something with our Ketra light called the natural show, where the lighting changes throughout the course of the day to match the sunlight. It's a pre-programmed thing, and it's out of the box to make it easy for everybody. And the beauty of it is that you can personalize and tweak it if you need to. Well, we sat in this space and installed this natural show when we first opened the Experience Center. And I looked at it, I was like, it feels too cold. Like, what's going on? It feels too cold. And what was happening is that the building opposite was a yellow brick building. And so the light entering the space was reflected in a more golden tone. And
Mhm.
so, because I'm a lighting nut, I sat there and every 30 minutes took a color temperature measurement and kind of tweaked the curve to be like perfectly precise. But I give that story to kind of then take it back to the Grand Canyon, where you have that direct light from the sun, but it's bouncing off those amazing kind of red rock formations, which is giving it this
Mhm.
very warmth to it.
Yeah.
You also have like its interaction with the atmosphere, right? Like I'm always amazed when I go down to Miami, how crisp that light is, right? Like being closer to the
Uh-huh.
equator, so much
Yeah.
white, the light we experience here. So you have that context of the geography. And then, if I always say to understand light, you have to squint your eyes to create like to understand the balance of highlights and darkness. It's easiest to squint your eyes and everything kind of gets tonally sorted. And if you
Oh.
squint your eyes and you look at, the Grand Canyon, as you said, that big chasm, in many cases goes into darkness with the exception of the wall that's being highlighted. And
Mhm.
so, that becomes a light source in and of itself, that plane of light, which again
And the
kind of,
effects of digital, right? The effects of
yeah,
digital as opposed to film when we always talk,
true,
right?
true.
Yeah. Yeah, where digital can just totally throw everything, right? Like it was, I mean, you can tell sometimes that it's in its little brain is just like freaking out, right? Because it's trying to adjust
It's
for things that are
recalibrating.
natural. Yeah.
Exactly. Although
Yeah.
I went to the Grand Canyon for the first time when I was 16 years old, and we had
Oh,
like tiny disposable cameras, and I'd never seen anything like this before. I was like wowed by the red rock, and I was so excited to go develop that film. And when we did, the pictures were terrible. They were so flat, and I was like, I remember having this moment of like,
no, I
did I
know,
make
I
up what I
know.
saw? Like, do I remember this correctly?
I know. It's because I know you just can't, right? Like even us like looking at it afterwards, because because right, I was 16, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe that's just what, but I mean, looking at it, even taking pictures of it, I mean, of course we were back away from the edge or whatever. We only went to the places where the guardrails were and things, and we did
Yeah.
take the rim trail. But yeah, I mean, you're just looking and it almost looks fake when you're looking at it. And then you
Yeah.
take a photo of it and you're like, this isn't what it looks like. Yeah. They're like, no,
Hike
I'm
down it
telling
in the
you, it's
depths of August.
thing.
I've
Yeah.
never been so
Yeah.
hot in my life, so you did good staying at the top.
Oh my gosh. Well, luckily it wasn't, it wasn't that hot. I mean, it was hot in Scottsdale. Boy, it was 104 in Scottsdale when we went after. Yeah, my kids are at the pool and they're like, it's 104 degrees. I'm like, yeah, and it's only the end of May.
I know, I know. Our context for finding hotels, my parents were very middle class and we found hotels like on the road as we drove from one place to the next. And it was like, it's got to be under $45 a night and it has to have a swimming pool. Like those were the conditions of finding a hotel in Arizona in August.
I know. Well, they're lower in price. They are lower in price. Like when yeah. Rather than like February. February, I think, is like the highest you can get it.
Imagine finding a hotel for $45 a night now. That would be amazing.
My gosh.
Or horrifying, one of the two.
It's probably one of those places that my daughter goes to where people just like rent out their property for like they'll have property in the middle of nowhere and they're like, oh, here, you can pitch your tent here for $45 a night. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's the only thing that you can probably get for $45, I'm sure. Yeah. 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 So what would you like to say about the future of architecture?
I mean, I think that for me, the future of architecture is really, about the coming together of all these future technologies and systems, but the importance of making sure that the experience still feels bespoke and intuitive. And, I think about like why I made the jump from working in the design profession to being a designer within a manufacturing brand. And it was truly, when I think about it, because of that excitement of what that future holds for us, right? I think, again, in many cases, a lot of the architecture that is being built now, unfortunately, isn't as connected to nature or place as it potentially could be. And then you think
Mhm.
about something like, lighting and technology, how that can augment that connection and bring everything together, or even bring senses of well-being to the space. Like these
Mhm.
are tools that we have at our disposal, that can really, elevate where architecture is going, and in some ways really bring it back to some of these more simple experiences that we've talked about through the course of this conversation. And so I
Mhm.
think, when I think about the future of architecture, it's, the excitement of what technology can do, to make it human,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
is critical. And I also think it's about, continuing to keep, a curiosity for all of the peripheral professions that surround us as architects, right?
Mhm.
Where, we should be learning from the art scenes and from, the travel world, or from the, science that's surrounding us. And I think there's kind of I feel like people are more interested in kind of expanding that aperture and, learning from all those other fields now.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to continue to kind of elevate our game and move things forward. So,
Yeah.
working in the specialty of lighting, that's important to us, of course, at Lutron and Ketra. But I think it's also something that, just brings a richness to the work that architecture and architects do, and that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that there's something, it's just some things you just can't experience, right? You can't experience things a lot. I mean, a lot of people say like, oh, just look online. I mean, you can't experience things by looking online. You have to actually go to spaces and start, and then you'll realize like how much richer it is, how much, and then that becomes, and then also conceptually, I mean,
Yep.
conceptually, lighting is pretty much in some part of your
Yep.
concept, there's going to be light. I mean, I don't meet with anybody that says like, oh, I want a really dark space. They might
No.
end up they might try to like recreate what they already have. And so it's more about trying to get them to like open up, like, okay, if you do want more light, then we are going to have to do this to the design, because
Mhm.
otherwise, a lot of times they just want to recreate what they already have,
Yeah,
because
I
it's
always
most
say
comfortable for them. Yeah.
totally. Like to
Yeah.
understand light, I always say that you have to like immerse yourself in it, and you have to marinate in it, almost like, you know, um, lobster in a boiling pot of water. Like you have to be like really embedded into it to understand it. And
Mhm.
to your point about experiencing things in person, I was recently at a talk hosted by Lux Magazine where they had Bunny Williams, the fabulous interior designer, speaking.
Uh-huh.
Someone in the audience said, what do you recommend, for people who are up and coming in interior design, working for you, or looking to have a career like yours? And she
Mhm.
brought it back to like, go see, touch, experience things in person. Like, don't let the world of Instagram and Pinterest flatten everything, because uh,
Mhm.
it's not the same thing. And to take those, weekend trips to go see Frank Lloyd Wright, or she was saying like, get on a, train and go out to Newport in Rhode Island and go see those mansions and see, what was being done there. And the
Mhm.
early 1800s, like all of that brings a richness to our design palette. And so I think that that's a really nice way to sum it up, which is like, go experience things in person. And
Uh-huh.
especially with the context of light, that's fundamental, to designing beautifully, is to have
Mhm.
understanding of light and what it can do through personal experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And do you have a showroom you have one in Los Angeles, right? Is
We
there?
do. Yeah, we
Okay.
have, some really great experience spaces in New York. We have two.
Okay.
Los Angeles, we have a really good one. Austin, Texas, which is the
Austin,
headquarters of
Texas. Yeah.
Ketra, really fantastic facility. It's also a manufacturing tour that can be done there. And then we have partners throughout the country who also have showrooms, where they've implemented our Ketra lighting in really wonderful and impactful ways. Miami, I can speak super highly of, Scottsdale, Arizona as well. So,
Mhm.
it's something that people can always find on our Lutron website, or reach out to their local
Mhm.
rep, who can then kind of steer them in the right direction of where to go experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, really, once you kind of experience that light that's in when you're and like I said, I know with a lot of like the lighting seminars and everything, there's a lot of numbers that are being spit out. And I always say, you know what? It's like it's not so much the numbers. Like if you I basically will sit there and like when the light comes up to when I feel comfortable, I'll say there, that's it.
Totally.
And then you guys can say, okay, that's this number and that's what
It's all
we'll
about
do.
the environment around it, right? Because you
Yes.
can have a light fixture that gives off 1,000 lumens. And if you're in a white room, that feels super bright and awesome. And if you're in a dark room, that is not nearly enough light, right? So to design in a vacuum of just spec sheets and numbers is a mistake.
Mhm,
It has to be in concert with, the materiality, the palette of the space.
mhm.
And then, mock-ups. I can't say enough about mock-ups. They're awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, like the age, right? Like I've been in with younger people, and I've like said, and it's in their right? It's in their house before it's designed, and then I've like said, like, can you do you have any lights in this room, right? Because I can't see enough, and then they're like, oh yeah, and then they turn on their dining room light, and I'm like, okay, that's and then the contractor's also like, I can't like see. We're like, so I mean, the older that you get, the more light you need in order to just like be able to see things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even with my kids in my house, it's like they're turning off lights. I'm turning.
It's so subjective. I mean, I'm the same way. I have terrible eyesight. And my husband, in our house has these like beautiful, moody Lutron scenes set up, like early morning work and then daytime. And he's like, working away on his computer at 5 o'clock in the morning. I wake up and I'm like, on, 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 on. And he's horrified. I'm like, you don't understand. I can't see otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, I can't see, it's
So
like it's just yeah, yeah. And it's I mean, and and I didn't have glasses before. Like everybody else in my family had glasses. I didn't. My eyes have been fine until this time. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to turn the lights on in every single room.
which is
Yeah.
why it's so important to have like lighting that's flexible
Yeah.
and really to
Yeah.
personalize it, because otherwise
Mhm.
it may not do what you intend it to do.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to Lutron and Ketra for sponsoring the podcast. And it's been great talking with you, Celia. And let's get together real soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.